All right, the first tip is to learn about yourself, which sounds kind of cliche, but it does work. So with this one, you're going to want to try a bunch of new activities and hobbies. Really, what we're looking for is we're trying to figure out which ones you really enjoy. A lot of times, reality does not meet expectations. One of my favorite movies ever is this movie called 500 Days of Summer. There's this really great scene where the main character's going to meet his ex, and he has all of these expectations on how it's supposed to go. But then it shows what the reality actually looks like, and it's nothing like the expectations. And learning about yourself and trying a bunch of new activities and hobbies can be a little like that. You have these expectations of, oh, it will make me feel so good if I try this or this. But sometimes the reality is you need to try those things and see what it is you actually enjoy. Now, we've been blessed with a lot of different success stories throughout our time here at Ex-Boyfriend Recovery. And probably one of my favorite things that we do is looking at our community and the progress people make. And so I'm going to actually attach a couple of images here from our community, from one of our community members, so you can see how seriously people take this and how awesome it is. You know, this particular person said that they graduated with a degree. They entered a second year in their master's, worked on their thesis, went to Costa Rica, found peace at the gym, started doing research jobs, got published, trying to do bucket list destination type things. All of these things cause this person to learn about themselves. And I think kind of the key thing is being okay being alone. The second tip is to remember who you were before the breakup. Now, you can totally motivate yourself after the breakup by doing hobbies you loved before you were in a relationship. So, for example, let's say you played guitar or painted a lot before you got into this relationship with your ex, but you put a little too much focus on your ex. You know, recently my wife and I just co-wrote an article on codependence because we believe that most of our clients are codependent. So that means a lot of their world revolves around their ex, when it needs to be the other way around. Their ex needs to revolve around them, or at least they should not be orbiting this other person. And a lot of times what happens is you forget who you were before the breakup. You stop doing those activities that you loved so much. So do those things again. You know, sometimes in relationships, our partner becomes the center of our world, and we stop doing the things we love because we'd rather spend our time with that partner. But going back to old hobbies will really help you focus on yourself after the breakup. Now, tip number 3 is daily affirmations. I actually came across this really great research from the National Library of Medicine, which basically was arguing that self-affirmation can activate brain systems associated with self-related processing and reward and is reinforced by future orientation. That's really complicated, but basically what it's arguing is that daily affirmations can help rewire your brain to eliminate negative talk and have a positive outlook on life. So like first thing in the morning, look in the mirror and say an affirmation. Now, the really cool thing about the brain is that even if you don't believe what you're saying out loud, your brain will start to believe it after a while as long as you say it out loud. And that's really what that research was pointing at or trying to prove. So try your best to eliminate any self-negative talk and replace it instead with positive affirmation. Let's say you lost your car keys. And when you find out that you lost your car keys, you say, "Oh, I lost my car keys again. I'm such an idiot." Your brain will process that and start to form that as a core belief. You'll start to have a negative outlook on your life. You'll start to literally think you are an idiot when you're not. So the way we recommend you should approach this is you would say or reframe it by giving yourself some grace. I lost my keys, and when I find them, I'm going to put them back in the same spot next time. Everyone loses their keys sometimes. That's the healthy way to approach it. So combining the daily affirmations can yield some incredible results and do wonders for your confidence. Tip number 4 is forgiving yourself if you're feeling shame, guilt, or even blaming yourself after the breakup. So every experience in life is a learning experience, including your breakup. This is actually something that my daughter doesn't do well at. There's an expectation to win all the time. And a lot of times losing is looked at as this very negative thing. But the reality is losing is where most of the growth occurs. So I'm trying to teach my daughter, at least, and I need to take my own advice sometimes, that losing is nothing more than an opportunity to improve. So it's not really a negative thing. It just is, hey, this approach didn't work. I just need to try a different approach next time. And as long as you have that consistent mentality, you can just have an incredibly positive results and outlook and progression in your life. Every experience in life is a life learning experience, including your breakup. So a lot of people will feel this intense regret over something that they did or said during the relationship, and that sometimes causes people to replay it over and over, and they get caught in this negative self-talk loop. We'll hear often from our clients, they'll say things like, if only I didn't say this, or if only I didn't get so emotional. You actually have to let that go. Forgive yourself if you're feeling shame. Forgive yourself for the guilt or the blame that you're giving yourself. It's not going to be productive. Tip number 5 is a pretty obvious one. Don't fall into addictions. Or if you do fall into addictions, fall into positive ones. So let's kind of frame this the correct way. When scientists look at your brain during a breakup, they notice that the part of the brain that gets activated when you're grieving is the same part of the brain that a drug addict will have lit up or light up when they're going through a period of withdrawal. And so what I find happens is people who, after a breakup, they get caught into what I call the negative addictions. Addictions like eating too much chocolate or binge drinking. But the reality is, what I think you need to do is take the addictive nature that you're maybe falling into and put it into something positive. I think David Goggins is maybe one of the most famous examples of what you could do if you literally have an addictive mentality. I mean, David Goggins, if you don't know anything about him, he used to be an incredibly overweight person, incredibly unhappy, had a horrible childhood. He allowed that memory and that experience to kind of shape him. And as a result, he was kind of caught in life. I think he was like something like a pest exterminator. And it just got to a point where he couldn't take it anymore. And so what he did is he used his addictive behavior that was falling into negative addictions, and he put it into more positive addictions, like working out or going after his dream job and putting everything into those. So I kind of think that's the proper way to fall into addictions. At least that's what's worked for a lot of my clients. Tip number 6 is to find a healthy balance between green exercise and indoor exercise with a buddy. All right, so there's a lot of different research backing this up. I think my wife, she helped me outline this, and she literally linked to 3 different studies that basically back up this entire point. But first, we need to kind of understand what green exercise is. So green exercise can be activities like nature walks, rock climbing, cycling, swimming, kayaking, or anything that will be out in nature. You're going to get the benefits of vitamin D, which is imperative to your health. And there's actually sufficient research to show that not having enough of the vitamin can lead to depression-like symptoms. Now, what's interesting is one of the funny things is last year, I hurt my knee. Before, I used to be a really avid runner. I'd be running something like 10 miles a day. I just loved it. So I would get a lot of vitamin D. But when I hurt my knee, I've still been unable to go out and run. So I end up being stuck inside cycling on the indoor trainer or the stationary bike. And what's interesting about this is I love working out. I still love working out, but I don't get the green exercise. I'm stuck indoors. The only thing that helps this is if I'm exercising with a buddy indoors, because it feels like you're not alone. And there's just something about going outside that also triggers euphoria for me. So I visited my parents a couple of weeks ago, and my dad said, "Hey, I know you can't run, but would you like to go on a bike with me outside?" And so I went on a bike ride with him outside, and I'm still to this day thinking about that bike ride because of how euphoric it made me feel. And this is maybe the power of green exercise. So get outdoors, engage. All right, tip number 7 is to declutter your life. So decluttering your life. This is something my wife is really, really big on. And there's a lot of great resources out there on this. Personally, I think probably Dana K. White has a really great 5-step process. Here's the thing. What do you do with all of these clothes when you're sort of decluttering your life? So there's a lot of good options out there. You can sell it on Poshmark, Mercari, Marketplace. But one thing my wife does is she donates her clothes to either women's shelters, homeless shelters, or someone she knows who would love it. What's really cool too is we have sometimes towels and old shirts and old stuffed animals. And my wife, she actually donated these to a local wildlife refuge. There's a fox at this wildlife refuge, and you can see my daughter's old toys there with the fox. So basically the rule to live by is if it still has tags on it, regift it, and when in doubt, throw it out. So tip number 8 is to connect with friends and family. So we talk a lot about this in our Holy Trinity concept, part of health, wealth, and relationships. And really it's that relationships aspect. A lot of times when we're looking at the Holy Trinity, we're talking about relationships with everyone else other than your ex. And after a breakup, it's really important to surround yourself with people that love and care about you. And when you do this, that love gets transferred and you co-regulate, which helps you find peace after the breakup. The one thing I will say to this is I do actually think the people you surround yourself with have a direct correlation to how you can turn yourself into having a more secure attachment style. So, for example, this can also work negatively. Sometimes if you have friends or family that are completely anxious or they are too much of a taker, I always think in relationships there's always givers and takers, and there needs to be almost like a balance of a give and a take from both parties. If you have a relationship with someone who is just constantly asking for your help and they're asking and asking, and essentially it's the giving tree and you get nothing in return, and pretty soon you have nothing left to give yourself, that's maybe a person that you should think about not spending as much time with. A huge part of attachment styles are formed by the people you surround yourself with. So you're always looking to surround yourself with secure individuals who will give you secure help. Tip number 9 is going on a social media cleanse. Taking a break from social media. Everyone knows by now that half the images on there are photoshopped, have filters on, or are just basically a fake reality. If you want to love yourself, you don't want to be comparing yourself to unrealistic photos. You also don't want to see how happy everyone is and how great everyone else is doing while you're at your lowest point. By the way, there is stats that show that people who post a lot usually aren't that happy. They post the happy seconds of their day when in reality, it's not like that at all. Tip number 10 is the ability to reparent yourself. We encourage people to become securely attached. Now, when you're securely attached, you will feel so much better about yourself. And one way to become secure is through something called inner child work. And basically, the way to look at inner child work is it's this process of reparenting yourself. It's basically giving yourself what you needed as a child, but you didn't get. And there's a lot of different ways that you can do this, but probably the best tips are to recognize and acknowledge your inner child. So you want to take some time to reflect on your childhood experiences or any emotional wounds or unmet needs you may have had, and then understand that your inner child represents your vulnerable and authentic self that may still carry some unresolved emotions. You're also going to want to cultivate self-expression, treat yourself with kindness, understanding, things like that. Tip number 11 is to see a therapist. My caveat here with therapy is to make sure that you're connecting yourself with the right individuals. Like I said, my wife and I, a few days ago, we partnered up on an article for codependence. Specifically, how do you deal with codependence after a breakup? And we talked about therapy type thing. And we talked about the importance of finding a therapist that specializes in codependence. There's a lot of therapeutic approaches out there. Cognitive behavioral theory, inner child work, somatic therapies, Jungian shadow work, internal family systems, psychodynamics, schema therapy, group therapy, family therapy, you name it. The important thing for you is to identify which therapy you feel will best fit you and your healing process after a breakup. And that is the therapy or therapist that you should be looking at finding. And then tip number 12 is to volunteer. Whatever type of passion you have, it's highly likely there's an opportunity to volunteer. So if you love animals, kids, designing, you can find a volunteer opportunity to match your skills or interests. If you like traveling, there's opportunities to volunteer abroad. My wife, she was actually a loaned executive for a little bit for the United Way, and she did a lot of volunteering. And every time she did something to help children in need, she felt amazing afterwards. But the only way that works is if you do it altruistically. So the formula here is finding something that you're passionate about and doing it out of kindness, not for the recognition and validation.